You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. I figured we could take questions from folks if and when we have listeners. You know, a lot of people want to work in politics. A lot of people want to work in advocacy. You've done both. I've done both. I'll real quick give a rundown of my bio, and then we'll talk about you because it's a lot longer. I worked... Evan and I met when I was the executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana, and you came along a couple years into my tenure there, and we shared an office for a couple years till I defected and went and started to try to make money. And then whatever, you're doing some like wrestling with your mic. It's driving me crazy. And thank you. Don't do it more of it. I know you well enough to know you did that on purpose. I even paused waiting for it, you punk. And so I've worked in media and libertarian politics for a long time, volunteered for a lot of campaigns at the Libertarian Party, full-time job setting up campaigns. Started the We Are Libertarians podcast, which is now the Chris Spangle Show. So please make sure to follow me here on stereo, but also go follow the Chris Spangle Show. You've had a lot more experience working in not just building political campaigns, but also advocacy. I figured we could take questions on that if people want to get into doing that, but mostly we just want to catch up with each other. It's been so long. When we shared an office and you had pantsless Fridays. I'm not kidding.
Good times.
Evan used to drink like full 2 liters of Dr. Pepper a day. You're the unhealthiest person I know, but you're so skinny.
Well, not anymore. I got kind of fat there for a little bit. Like life caught up to me. I came back from working in Nick Sarwark's campaign in Phoenix. Was there for like a year and a half. And when I came back, my 6-year-old nephew comes walking up to me, pokes me in the stomach and says, "You're fat." And that was the first words he said to me in a year and a half. And I was like, okay, time to diet. But yeah.
So, like, take us all the way back to like when you started, like, weren't you like some big time blogger too back in the day?
Yeah, back in 2000, for like, oh God, from 2000 to 2006, maybe a little bit longer than that. I was one of the top 10 gay bloggers in the country. I ran a website called badevan.com. I actually got the scoop on a couple of political sex scandals involving, young male prostitutes and hardcore Republican social conservatives. And so that was a lot of fun. So I had a lot of activism outside of my political campaigning within the LGBT community, working with like marriage equality issues, things like that, and a lot of privacy issues, helping draft legislation to prevent cops from being able to access your phones without mobile phones without a warrant, and then emails and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a lot of my activism. Which is, it's interesting being a young gay guy in a very red, socially conservative state, and you're going to like these Tea Party groups and convincing them that they should support same-sex marriage because it's a tax issue. And they're like, wow, okay. Well, I totally get that. Yeah, that's really not fair. Okay, well, we could support that. We don't like queers, but like, yeah, you should be,
Isn't it? I was thinking about this yesterday, like how different the Republican Party, because the Democrats aren't all that different. It doesn't seem like we can all talk about socialism, but like, I don't know, Nancy Pelosi isn't that much different than Dick Durbin back in, or any of these people. But like the social.
Well, it's a bad example because they've both been in Congress for the same amount of time, basically.
I know,
they're both ancient.
I knew it about halfway through, but like when you think about the right, because we've both really kind of worked with the right a lot, and when we were at the Libertarian Party, it was prime Tea Party time. Like the party is so much different. Even the Libertarian movement is so much different.
Thanks, Melissa Hubbard, for helping us get them all organized.
Well, like when we were coming up in politics in the early days, it was a lot of social conservatism, and gay rights was a huge issue. Like is that even a blip on the radar at this point? I mean, some of those issues that were just so divisive in 2005, for instance, like, I mean, the wars,
well, they shifted.
Some of that stuff is just gone.
Well, it all shifted. I mean, so, I look back because, I mean, I've been involved in politics since I was a really, young kid. And there's always that shift in what is the crucial thing for them. And there's always been, kind of the social conservative aspect to the Republican Party. So you look at it today, and even though gay marriage issues are popping up again right now, Indiana filed is going to be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court over gay parenting issues. Removing same-sex parents from birth certificates is the legal case right now. So it's not completely dead. It's just not as I guess a hostile ground that it used to be. Now it's more social justice reform. So if you make any comments about social justice reform, it means you want cops to die in the street. Like that's what it means. You're a cop killer. If you say, and the left really did screw this up. Defund the police is a great slogan, and like it gives you the anger and it gives you the visceral reaction. The problem is you're not defunding the police, you're reforming the police. And when you say defund the police, it gives the right, the ability, the chance to say, oh, well, they don't want any cops at all. So when you're, getting, burglarized in your home because you're a cuck who doesn't have any guns at home, the cops aren't going to be there. It's going to be a call center in India answering your 911 call. And so the issues just shift. And they take them with the same passion. When they find that thing that they want to believe in, it's an all or nothing. You're trying to destroy America if you don't believe the way I do. And I think Democrats, for the most part, have been different in that. You're not destroying America because we disagree. You're a POS and a Trumpkin if you disagree with me, but you're not destroying America.
Yeah,
is kind of how I see them now.
So, like, how have you? I mean, have your own interests? Starting young, being really engaged in an issue that was very hot at the time, but isn't as hot now. Like, have your interests shift? Like, how do you continue? Because you still continue to work in activism and draw a paycheck from political sources, right? Like, your day job is basically still setting up campaigns and doing all. Well, like, so my question is, like, what are you doing now? As the thing that you really were engaged in is no longer kind of on top of people's minds, did you just have to change? Did you personally change? Like, does my question make sense even?
Yeah. No, I mean, I spent probably, 12 years dedicated to, gay rights issues. And while they're not completely solved, for me, they pretty much are. Like, I look at it and I say, okay, I'm being treated as equally as possible.
You're kind of comfortable with where things are at now, and so my question was then, how do you pivot? What do you do now? What do you do when kind of the thing that you devoted your activism to ends?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's so I found something else more passionate about. So I didn't give up on gay rights and things. It reached a point where I felt I was equal and protected under the law. So that wasn't a fight for me anymore. There are other people who want to keep fighting for now, like special privileges and rights, and that's just not my bag. So then I see things that become more important to me, and I just get involved in those. So, like, for me, the vaping industry. Because it changed my life and it changed many members of my family's lives. We're all heavy smokers. And then criminal justice reform. That's always been a thing that I've been talking about. Basically high school. But I'd say about 6-7 years ago, it really started to become something deeply important to me. So you just find that thing and you just pivot. And as long as you're tackling issues that you're passionate about, it will never be hard to find work in that space. If you are the next big thing, you will always be competing with other people, and you'll never really be good at it. Therefore, you just won't get the same jobs.
Right. So, like, what do you enjoy doing? Like, when I say advocacy work, like, what does that entail for you?
Everything, being legislatures and crafting laws or amendments to laws.
Because you actually, like, when we would sit, so, like, you and I would, allow me to interrupt, like, you and I would sit around in the office, and, like, at the time, I didn't give a shit about policy. You know, I was very much the political guy, like, let me set up this campaign for you, let me teach you how to do canvassing. But you'd like actually read legislation and write bills, and you were the first libertarian that I'd ever met that actually did that, which you'd think we'd have more success if people did do that. But like, you actually would like read code and then write amendments to it, which is kind of novel.
Yeah, I still do that.
Yeah, because no life, I guess.
Not only do I do it for bills that I have no impact on, or am going to actually like submit my amendments to that legislator. I just find bills that have problems in them. Literally every piece of legislation that gets proposed in Indiana, I read at least twice.
Why?
And because I want to know what they're doing. Also, it gives me a base for about that legislator. So if I know that, Todd Houston introduced this one particular bill 4 times, I know that's something that he's passionate about. Something that if it's something I agree with, I know we have a thing that I can work with him on. As opposed to if he just introduced it once, it might have been a favor to a constituent. It could have been a favor to another legislator who was maxed out on their bills. But if I see that you've put it forward multiple times, then I know it's somewhat important to you. Now, if you're Mike Delph back in the day, you kept putting the same stupid bills up over and over again without ever changing them. That tells me your stuff is never going to go anywhere because you're never going to get any from other members. But if every time you introduce the bill, it's slightly different and slightly better, there's a better chance that you're actually going to get that committee hearing and that you're going to get it onto the floor, and then it's going to move in the other chamber. So I look for the things that actually have an impact on as opposed to wasting my time. So you learn those and know those things by reading them.
Yeah, so how do you know that, like, those changes? Does that tell you that legislator is actually going and talking to other legislators and horse trading versus a Mike Delph bill that he's just throwing that up there so he can then say, well, I filed this and here's the press release and donate to my campaign?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, you can see, is this another idiot legislator who's crafting this in? Is it a high-powered, 3-letter law firm putting this in? Is this language coming from an agency? When you've done it enough, you can tell who crafted the amendment. Was it something that, and the way, one of the things you can look for is legislative services write the amendment? Or was it done outside of legislative services, submitted to them and accepted as is? And you just have to know how these amendments are written, how code is written, and how legislative operates to be able to spot who probably drafted this. And that'll tell you a lot right there. If it's another legislator, it means that they're working with within their caucus to try to make the bill better or to horse trade. If it's coming from a lobbyist, it's probably got a lot of problems with it.
What is legislative services?
Whenever you are going to introduce a bill as a legislator, there's this office that you go to, and you can either hand them a bill already crafted, or you can hand them like I want to do X, write me a bill. And if they like you, they'll do a really good job writing that bill. If they don't like you, it'll be 1 page.
Right.
But so legislative services basically puts it into code and formats it correctly and prepares it to be sent to the president pro tem or the Speaker of the House.
So, hey, let's take a couple questions. If you've got questions for Evan or for me, if you're thinking about jumping in, make sure you follow Evan and I here on Stereo. You can also listen to me at the Chris Spangle Show at chris-spangle.com.
These comments are something else.
Yeah, Evan, your sister does not give you any, like, she just fucks with you all the time still, doesn't she? She's like 40, right? 42?
Wait, I'm like 10 years older than her. So
well,
that
that's
makes me like 50. So no. No, I think she's 29, 28, something like that. I don't know. Right around there.
Just a babe in the woods back in the day. Your signal's still a little choppy, by the way.
Hey, Chris Spangle, man, can I get a live with you on politics, man? Hit me up on my IG, man. If not, it's cool, man. But I've been listening to it, not even knowing I was listening to it. But I was like, who the hell is this? But yeah, I'm gonna hit you up. And Bad E Evan, I want to hit you up too, bro. Let's get it. Because I got a very unique viewpoint that, yeah, I think I want to know what y'all feel about it.
That was Love God. Yeah, hit us up.
Are we ever going to get to the end of Donald Trump trying to go against the fact that he's lost the election, period, point blank? When is he actually going to stop so that the country can go on and do everything that we're meant to do?
Man, who you...
He's not.
No, the answer to that is absolutely not.
That's his brand.
Yeah, the brand is that this is his stab in the back. So we'll talk about Trump in a minute. I guess the way that I'm going to approach it from here on out is that I'm going to ignore him. You know, I mean, if it's, you know, with maybe a few strategic strikes here and there, but for the most part, let those people go on their own way. Keep challenging them where they need to be challenged. You know, have thoughtful conversations with your friends that believe this stuff and see what you can do. Some of them are lost cause, but like some of the polling says that only 3% of the country actually buys what he's selling, you know, and everybody else is just kind of skeptical, which means the vast majority of people are open to being persuaded to the truth.
I don't know about that.
He lost the election. Maybe not.
Go ahead. I have a hard time with that statistic. I think there's quite a few people. I think the majority of people who voted for Trump did so because they buy into it. They may know that he is full of crap and that he's a con man and a narcissist, but they're buying what he's selling because they want it. So you can't say that they don't agree with him or don't know. Like, yeah, I just don't see that. But
I think the hardcore cultist is a smaller percentage than we think. But I do think that there is a larger portion that once they, you know, like I talked to a family member and they're like, "What do you, you know? Well, if the election was real," I go, "The election was real." They go, "You think so?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "This, and this," and they go, "Oh, all right, thanks." I believe you.
Yeah, but I mean, Chris, I mean, how can we trust you? I mean, you've got that Dominion money. Right. You worked for them.
Yeah, like go check out The Dispatch, thedispatch.com. It's a Republican website that fact checks a lot of this stuff. These are hardcore conservatives that have a long record of fighting the evil left. You know, and they've fact-checked a lot of the Dominion stuff, the voting irregularities, and like your family member that you're concerned about is either going to listen to them or they're not, and there's not much you can do about it. But I think there comes a certain point where you just go, listen, this person doesn't care about democracy. This person doesn't care about empathy. This person doesn't, like, and you just have to go, this is who this person is, and you move on. But I think with Trump, no, Trump's grievance brand needs the stab in the back. Just like, you know, the stab in the back politics is how every authoritarian-minded person tends to try and mobilize their group. But the rest of the world can kind of just ignore it and move on. And it's really going to take the Republican Party going, you know, I had a conversation with a guy today that's very influential. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, you got to speak up. You got to speak up because you're going to create a lane in the Republican Party that needs to be created. What were you going to say?
The thing that I come to when I think about Trump and, well, you know, you want Trump gone because he was just so bad for the country. And I get it. I'm with you 100%. However, when Bush was president, you know, several of us, many Democrats, every libertarian was talking about the abuse of power by President Bush. And then when Obama was in office, the Republicans were talking about it and libertarians were talking about it. But Democrats were cool now. Same powers, same things, doing some of the same stuff, bombing kids in foreign countries with drones. No one wanted to talk about presidential powers and authorities then. Now we move into the Trump era, and we're all kind of talking about it, but we're not.
Right.
Like libertarians are, but Democrats and Republicans aren't talking about restricting the power of the office. They're how bad he was.
I gotta correct you on that. The libertarians are not. Like the attitude towards Trump from most libertarians is not the same as it was towards Bush, for instance. It was if you said, even to this day, if you say you like George W. Bush, or if you say you like Barack Obama, you would get killed. You'd get run out of the movement. But if you say that you don't if you say you like Donald Trump, then you're accepted. If you say you don't like Donald Trump, you have TDS. Like the libertarian movement at large has a really weird like of Donald Trump, even though he's the same president as the last few.
I wouldn't say the libertarian movement. I would say the liberty movement, which I think are two separate things. I think the Libertarian Party and the libertarian movement has been infected with some aspects of social conservatism.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to say far right Nazi white supremacists.
No, populism.
I don't want to get hated.
Populism and the anti-elitism stuff, and I mean it's gone.
It's definitely there, but it's not so much within our party. It's more that liberty movement, and there are a lot of those organizations. But you're absolutely right. Like those people, those folks. I do see them all the time where they're like, Trump is great. Like, read your platform.
Right.
What are you talking about? But I think he sparked something in them that's deep seated, that they don't want to come to terms with who they are as people, even though they see it reflected in Trump. I just think that's what it is it's the blinders on to seeing who they are and what they actually really stand for.
Yeah.
I think it'll be telling in a few years. He's going to run again. He's going to run in 2024. If for one reason, and that's the merch money. This made him money. And there is another very famous Republican perennial candidate who also ran for money. I'm not going to throw any names out because I don't want my tires slashed. But I think that eventually that's going to and I think he's going to continue being there as long as the calf can be suckled on.
Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, we'll move on from Trump now. Make sure you follow me here on Stereo and then follow the Chris Spangle Show on podcast.
What's up, guys? This is Susie Sitcom. I've never heard you on Stereo before, so I'm wanting to listen in. Hey, you're just listening in. Sending some love, and I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say. All right. Later.
Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it.
SCOTUS just tossed out his PA appeal.
Yeah, the Supreme Court just tossed out his Pennsylvania appeal. He's lost like 40-some lawsuits. He keeps losing over and over and
49.
over. But 49. But here's the thing, Evan. How did the deep state get to the 3 Supreme Court justices that he appointed? That's what I want to know. How could they rob him?
I am like... So here's the thing that boggles my mind about Trump being able to get these appointments to the Supreme Court. It's just confounding that nobody stopped that. That, the Republicans in the Senate were like, yeah, cool beans. Because the reality is it's such a far swing in one direction now that it's going to backfire and bite them in the ass.
No, I mean, you take a guy like, I don't know what you thought of Jim Banks, but like he was a congressman. He is a congressman here in Indiana. He is Christy Avery's congressman up in the Fort Wayne area. And like Banks, I don't know if you were around yet, but wanted to have a meeting with the Libertarian Party of Indiana about our stance on gay marriage and the gay marriage amendment that they were trying to pass here. And we had like an hour.
HJR 6.
Yeah, HJR 6. We had a 2-hour meeting with him at the Antelope Club, talked through all of our different policy positions, made like no other politician ever did that. Like, he wanted to know, why are you guys on the right, but you have a different opinion than the opposite opinion on gay rights than Republicans do? He wanted to understand us, and he was always very thoughtful. And then something happened this year where he went full Trumpy, and now is just pushing, he just introduced some bill. He's head of the Republican Study Committee, by the way. So what the Republican Congressional Caucus pushes is what Banks is helping craft, which is partly why he's really, what it comes down to is he gave up on policy and is building a personal brand around the cult of Trump. And it's disheartening to see like a thoughtful guy like that who does have principles give that up to build name ID by just saying ridiculous things that hurt the country. And I don't know what is going on with a guy like that, because I get that Trump is a narcissist and just is Trump. Like, he is who he is. But I don't get why everybody else, especially at this point where he's lost, why they feel they have to go along with it, because now's the time to strangle the baby in the crib. Because if you don't do it now, when Trump's entire movement was built on winning, and it was built on being popular, and it was built on power, and now that he's got none of those three things, you can easily like move in and take over as a party and push this degradation out and start rebuilding, but instead they're just embracing it, and I don't get that, and it's really going to cost them in the long run, because you and I are two people that probably vote Republican more than we vote Democrat, and there's not a chance in hell that I'm voting for any of these Republicans. It's, if you're building your entire campaign message about nativism and racism and big government spending and like there's nothing there that culture wars, you're just basically Hillary Clinton, but
the opposite,
somehow more narcissistic. I don't, so there's nothing like, if you want to bring the 60% of the country that's in the middle back to where you're at, like that likes limited government but doesn't want your racist BS. I don't get what they're doing as a party, and there's probably no forethought. I mean, it's mystifying.
Oh, hey, apparently somebody was shot next door.
Oh, well,
just popped up, and the cops are outside. It's cool. This is downtown Indianapolis. Like, if it's not within 25 feet, like, I don't get out of bed.
All right, let's play another couple comments here.
So why was the election real every time that someone that was Democratic lost, but suddenly now it is Donald Trump who is lost, and now suddenly the election's not real? That's the type of stuff that I don't understand, because racism is not real, and now the election is not real. It's just, this is dumb. The whole situation that's going on around his presidency, a lot of it has been dumb. It has been ridiculous. It's been throw a rock, hide my hand. It's just, it's really, really frustrating. And as an educator, it becomes even more and more frustrating for me, because I have students who are not old enough to vote, but they're bringing to school the beliefs of their parents. So it gets kind of irritating.
Yeah, so I wonder if when you were working in advocacy, like, all right, go make a comment, but then I have a question for you about the denialism that she's kind of touching on.
The reality is that every despot and tyrant in history that was in some sort of republic or democracy has always questioned the validity of an election. That is what you go to, is you question the validity so that you can seize power, so that you can seize what, temporary power while this is investigated and sorted out, which just then consolidates your security base, so then you can seize absolute control of the government. Now, we have enough checks and balances in this country that that's not happening here. But Trump's people have been going to state legislators asking them to invalidate their state's vote and to select their electoral college representatives from the legislature. He's trying to do that thing, but it's not going to happen because that's not how our country operates. But if this was another country, there are several examples, recent examples. Venezuela is one, where it happens all the time, and sometimes, honestly, our government's involved in it.
Right.
So
if
no fear about that.
If the election was closer, it'd be a different story. But
it's the election is real. It happened. It's over. Biden is in the transition team. I'm not a big fan of Biden. I'm not anti-Biden. But he will be the president of the United States come January 20th.
Yeah, we did a whole episode. We did a couple episodes. So on the Chris Spangle show, go check it out. Look for that, or We Are Libertarians is the title right now. We're in a name transition. We did an episode based on like 2 months before outlining this whole plan, and everything that Trump said he was going to do that was reported by The Atlantic happened. And then we did one on the Electoral College. So if you want to know how the Electoral College process works and the nuts and bolts of how a president gets elected, we have a couple episodes ago that we did that. So next comment here on Stereo. Please make sure you follow us here on Stereo. My username is Chris Spangle, and you can follow Evan at Bad Evan.
Bad Evan.
Bad Evan.
How is Donald Trump the same president as the last few? I'd never heard anyone use that terminology, and I would like to know more about that.
So when you really dig down into the way that the American system is designed, it is a slow changing process, which is partly a benefit with Donald Trump because Donald Trump is a change agent who wants to radically stretch these political norms. And if you want to see why political norms are important, there's a great book by Mike Duncan called The Storm Before the Storm about the fall of the Roman Republic. And there were these two brothers named the Gracchi brothers that came in and basically did what Trump did, which was change all these norms and basically broke Roman politics that led towards an emperor. And in the American system, it's set up so that you have two or more factions that keep each other in check. So the far left, the far right cannot go too far because it's going to. So let's say Joe Biden gets elected in a landslide. He gets a Senate and a House with supermajorities, or they get rid of the filibuster. They pass a bunch of stuff. The American system, not just the system of government, but the American character, is basically that that if one side goes too far, the pendulum swings on the other side and corrects that. And so there's a slow process, which can be deadly and maddening when it comes to things like ending the drug war or criminal justice reform and all the issues that fall under that. It moves too slowly. But then there are issues like a president undermining the entire vote and wanting to get rid of all the entire checks and balances on the vote, for instance, were put in place by Republicans after, in 1960, Nixon had the election stolen from him by Kennedy in Chicago and Texas. And after that, Nixon and the GOP went to work on trying to lock down the vote, first to make it secure, but then also to make sure that minorities couldn't vote as part of the Southern strategy. And so, the vote is hilariously, the vote is secure because of Republicans, but they don't see it that way. But what they did was enshrine in law a lot of the political norms that Americans have seen. Like we have this story that we tell ourselves about what it means to be an American, how the American government operates, what the Constitution does. And so they locked in the fact that the vote is everybody should be able to vote. Everyone gets one vote. It should be totally secure. It should be a secret vote, but it also needs to be easily countable. So that's an example of how the system kind of locks in traditions. So that being said, that system of consistency, essentially, that is embodied by the civil service and bureaucracies and agencies. Those things don't really change all that much. You can appoint a lot of people. Now Trump, in a lot of that bureaucracy, was a wild bull in that he didn't appoint people to the EPA or Health and Human Services or the FAA or he didn't appoint like 25% of the federal workforce that a normal president would appoint. Now, as most libertarians would go, well, isn't that great? That's good, right? And I'm like, no, because now Joe Biden, like if you're a Republican, Joe Biden is now appointing 50% of the workforce. So how do you see that as a win, right? And so when you look at the foreign policy of the Trump administration, it's pretty darn close to the Barack Obama foreign policy and the choices that he made. Now, Barack Obama was a radical difference from George Bush's foreign policy. Obama was much more non-interventionist than Bush's obvious interventionism, and Trump carried that on. So he basically put in he carried on a lot of the same policies that Barack Obama carried on in that aspect. When you look at like when the pandemic hit, with the stimulus and the bailouts, that's almost exactly what George Bush and Barack Obama did.
For clunkers and
cash for clunkers,
the mortgage crisis.
Yeah. When you start to drill into the decisions that a president makes, Donald Trump was entirely a media figure. The people that were running his administration were Bush people, or they were longtime party hacks like Reince Priebus, or they were Jim Mattis, who had spent his whole career in the military running the DOD, or Dan Coates, who was director of national intelligence. When you read all these steamy Trump books that tell you all the inside story, it's all about how the swamp, quote unquote, or the establishment was taking his erratic orders and ignoring them. And they were being consistent and just carrying on with a lot of the policies. There are some things, like, for instance, the kids in cages. I remember being outraged that Barack Obama had somewhat of a separation policy with kids on the border. But it was like a couple dozen. It wasn't hundreds and hundreds and 1,200 kids missing from their parents, And so Donald Trump did a lot of the ugly things by an order of magnitude that made us all really flinch. But he was a very clarifying agent in that you saw for the first time how your government operated and you didn't like it. The mistake you cannot make with Donald Trump is just assuming that is only because of Donald Trump. Like, Russia tried to break into Clinton's campaigns. Russia tries to break into every presidential campaign. It's just that you learned about foreign agents trying to infiltrate presidential campaigns because of the media scrutiny on Donald Trump. That's a positive. But there isn't a massive amount of change between all of these different administrations. There is a lot of difference in style.
And numbers.
Yeah.
It's the size. It really is the size that matters. I don't care what you told you. It is.
Like, for instance, the amount of debt that was added by Donald Trump in 4 years was twice the amount of debt that Barack Obama added in 8.
Yeah. I mean, the policies of separation, the policy amnesty at the border were actually the exact same policies. Chris was exactly right on that. The only one that was different was DACA. DACA was an Obama-era policy that Trump shut down. But the reason why the public was outraged about these things was because it was such large numbers that you see these facilities. But every single one of those facilities, including those caged areas, were built by Obama. They were all fairly new, and they were part of his policies at the time. So Trump just ran with it. He took a racist policy and, made it a cornerstone and made sure it ran efficiently for what they wanted it to do.
Now he was a vast difference in terms of like tariffs, which we didn't have a lot of. There was a big difference in how he approached like allies and NATO and the Paris Peace Accords and some of that stuff. But
well, it went back to being very similar to Bush, because
right.
Bush was, you're either with us or against us mentality with Bush. We had more embargoes under Bush. We had, I don't think as many tariffs, but we definitely had freezes on other countries under Bush. So I think their foreign policy style in that regard was very similar.
All right, so we're backed up on questions. Let's burn through some of these.
Okay.
Whoa, you just not going to speed past that. Like, you ain't say what you just said. Strangle a baby in a crib. Now it's time to strangle the baby in the crib. That's hilarious. That's a crazy-ass expression, bro. That's a crazy-ass expression. And you was talking about Trump. You feel me? Like, it's time to end his presidency or whatever you was, it was related to that. But strangle the baby in the crib, I wouldn't have used that. I wouldn't have used that.
Have you never played the game of Would You Kill Baby Hitler? Like that's what I was basically saying. Like, when you have a movement, you have to kill baby Hitler, and then some people go, well, no, I'll raise Hitler in a different way. And I don't know. There's structural changes there. That's why I went for the inartful phrase that I did. I do not advocate the murdering of children unless it's for adrenochrome.
Our government needs a major overhaul right now. The things that have been happening here, they're just not fair, everybody. And we need to understand that. Is why are we, the people, being screwed over by our government time and time again? And it's getting to the point now where they don't even care what our vote is. They want to argue that our vote's wrong. And I think we are in a really trying time here. And I don't even think the Biden's going to be able to help us, because he's out of his mind and he's a pushover. We need someone that actually cares about the people to get in there and fight for us, because they're trying to fight against us. We need somebody in there to fight for us. The people's needs, not the corporations, not the 1%, the majority of the people, that make up the country and build everything and make everything. Come on.
Well, Sav, here's what I would say to you. And here, let me say this. One of the beautiful things about the American system and the constitutional order that we have now is that you can get involved and you can become one of the elites pretty darn easily. The people that interact with the government officials that have the most impact in your life are the most local to you. For God's sake, Evan, please stop shoving your microphone up your asshole. My God, what are you doing? Are you literally fisting with your microphone in your ass right now, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It just fits nicely. It's the ear cups.
So what I would say is that you should get involved. You are the people. You can go get involved. Like, I've seen do you remember, Evan, when the Rush County Libertarians county party started showing up with a video camera to county council meetings and putting them on YouTube? The entire county government was terrified, canceled a $100 million project because of it. All this corruption got cleaned up because all of the sudden, the first citizens that had shown up to a county meeting in multiple years, I think it was like half a dozen years was the first time that a citizen had gone to a county council meeting, and they dared put it on YouTube, and these politicians that had just been doing whatever they wanted, which, I mean, these politicians are their neighbors. They knew their names, these are not lizard people that are flying in. They're just your neighbors who think they're doing the right thing, but then if they are going to be challenged on it, questioned on it, have to answer questions from their fellow citizens, this stuff happens in public forums that you can show up to. It's just that most people don't show up to any of it. They don't choose. Like here in Indianapolis, we have Channel 16. You could watch every county public meeting. You can go on your city's website right now and watch all of these city council meetings. It's really easy to get involved because politicians put cameras on themselves. It's just that we, the people, don't watch it. So I don't really feel bad for I don't really have, I do blame politicians for the shitty government that we have, but at the end of the day, ambitious people are going to take advantage of a system when nobody's checking them. And you know, if you're in a situation where nobody's going to check you and you can do whatever you want, then you're probably going to do some bullshit too. And so we, the people, are the check on these people that are pulling the bullshit, and we've let our guard down. We don't get involved, and we throw up our hands and go, it's hopeless. We need a better president. And it's like, no, you don't need a president. The president is far more irrelevant to your life than your city councilman. Show up.
Okay, Chris, let me put this in a better way. That's actually inspiring, because you are a demotivating motherfucker.
No, that was
okay. So
people are moved right now
to the bathroom. So Biden is not a radical progressive, and neither was Obama. Honestly, he was very centrist on a lot of issues. Biden's radical agenda is going to be to things back to the way they were before Trump. He's just going to undo the shittiness of Trump. But they're not going to reach that next run. There's not going to be some bold new strategy or bold new thing to move the country forward. Those things don't come from the president. They don't come from Congress, and they don't come from governors, and they don't come from state legislators. They come from people in the community who see the thing that needs to be fixed and demand that it gets fixed. All of those movements are what have changed this country. It was the Civil Rights March. You know, it had to be built up. People had to see the people in the street marching. They had to see work stoppages, for there to be women's rights, for there to be rights of minorities, for there to be gay rights in this country. It took people stepping forward with courage. You know, you look back at San Francisco, because this is my history and this is how I relate. In San Francisco, Harvey Milk created the coming out day. And it was the day that you would call home and tell your parents that you were gay, because they didn't know. You just left for San Francisco or New York. And it was a profound thing. You were standing up, and then those people then would march on the city council or the county commissioners, then the governor's office. And they beat horrible pieces of legislation as a movement. You know, Spike Cohen says, who was our VP candidate for the Libertarian Party, you are the power. You absolutely are. You want to see some sort of radical change in this country? You want to see laws changed to benefit people and not corporations and militaries and governments? Then demand it. Get active and do something about it. Because as long as you sit on the couch, they don't have to worry about you.
I don't see how that was any more inspiring than what I brought to the table, but okay.
Because I said it.
I know. All right, next question. Can't hear you, buddy. Sorry.
Hey, guys. Loving the show. You guys are both really hot. Call me sometimes. Bye.
Thank you, Christy. Oh, sorry, bud. Well, I think he's just listening to SVU in the background.
Kiss my booty, it is fucking fruity. Kiss my booty, it is fucking fruity. Kiss my booty, kiss my booty.
Evan, do you want to take that?
It's kind of hairy right now. For the past 10 years, I've developed this hair in odd places that it didn't used to be. But I mean, you know, I am not going to judge you for your kink. No kink shame here, buddy.
Be sure to follow us if you're enjoying the conversation, Chris Spangle or Bad Evan on stereo. And please go download the Chris Spangle Show.
Kiss my chocolate nuts and kiss my butt. Kiss my chocolate grits and lick my shits.
So since Obama started the cages along the border and Trump made it run more efficient, are you saying that there's actually a benefit to having that, or is that just a bad policy that both Republicans and Democrats share?
Oh, yeah, no, we are.
It is a bad policy.
Way
bad policy.
I think that it is.
Evan, and it didn't start. It didn't start under Obama, by the way. He just built those particular buildings. This is a system and a problem that's been going on in the country for generations. We've viewed immigrants as less than. And Ronald Reagan actually campaigned against illegal immigration, but then in his first term, he offered amnesty and created the SB work visa that allowed people to come to the country for, I think it was 6 months at a time and work and then go home to their home country. And then they could come back again, endless cycles, but they were going home and they were paying taxes. But yeah, this is a bad policy. Closed borders and closed immigration create hostilities, and it's actually really bad for the economy, just to put it simply.
Yeah, the Flores decision that made this, it was a lawsuit in 1997 under Clinton. And so, this policy of family separation and detention goes back that far. So, and that was Clinton when he was president. So, yeah, no, I think that the separation and permanent orphanage of 1,200 children is one of the most evil things that my government has done in my lifetime. I am absolutely, completely opposed to that. Libertarians, by and large, are for open borders, for as few limits on travel and labor as possible. And so, as Evan alluded to, when people come, here's how I'd put it. DACA, for instance, the DACA kids, I think, how many kids is it? Is it like 3,000, 4,000? It's just a few thousand people. But they make up $1 billion in economic activity in the United States. And it's because when you increase supply of labor, all of a sudden, more people are buying things, they're supporting the economy. And so the more labor we have here in America, the more people we have here contributing, the more doctors we have at hospitals, the more students we have at universities. That's better for America and its strength. And there's really no reason to limit any of that. I mean, if you want to set the cap at, all right, we'll make it harder for people to become citizens and vote, fine. That would be the thing that I would negotiate away. But at the end of the day, having people come here and different cultures coming and participating in the American experience, new businesses, new families, these are all great things. I live in the second largest concentration of Chin outside of Burma, and I have absolutely loved watching this community grow and change over the last 15 years and getting to know my new neighbors. I've really enjoyed getting to know the Chin people. I mean, that's enriching in my life. It's not taking anything away from me. So I'm very on the opposite side of Trump and immigration. What were you going to say, Evan?
One of the things that I look for as a lesson in the importance of cultural diversity is actually the French Foreign Legion. It was one of the strongest military forces in the country for generations. And basically their policy was to bring people from other countries to fight as their soldiers. And it was all about having different perspective. If you are a desert culture, you're going to have a perspective for when you're going to war in a desert climate. You're not going to know more things than somebody who was from an Arctic culture. And it wasn't just the French Foreign Legion, because it was actually the Legion in the Roman Empire. Granted, most of those people were slaves who were forced to do it, but the French Foreign Legion was a voluntary system that people would come and join, and they would get educated, and they could actually get French citizenship when they finished their tour of duty. But it became one of the strongest fighting forces because everybody came from different cultures and different perspectives, and it gave them the ability to adapt quicker than going to a military think tank to try to come up with the idea of, what kind of coat we wear in Russia in winter. They had soldiers to tell them. So cultural diversity is a good thing for us.
Next question.
Authoritarianship teaches us to abide by the rules of the authoritarian, but a democracy teaches us how to come together as two different politicians and form an idea or a respect for the people, and the people get to decide. So if you're an authoritarian, the people have no choice. But if you are in a democracy, we have a choice.
Yeah, so it goes back to the system that I was talking
any
about.
representative system.
Yeah, so let's take Confederate statues, for instance. So I believe Confederate statues should be removed. I'm 100% behind that. I don't believe that they should be chained to the back of a truck and pulled and toppled in the middle of the night in the middle of a mob. And why do I think that? Because the representative system would have a couple hearings on it. People would talk about it. It'd be a controversial issue. The people would decide on it. Hearts and minds would be changed through the process of negotiating and talking that out. Neighbors would get to know each other better. And it is a collaborative process as opposed to one person or a ruling group of people or a mob saying this is what we're going to do and it doesn't matter what anybody else wants. Suck it, And so it's a much healthier system, and sometimes it doesn't get it right. Some city councils may leave the statues up as they have for generations now, or put them up, and that's wrong.
Well,
and it's going to get it wrong.
With that analogy, that situation actually is a teaching moment. It's a moment for people to hear the truth about why that thing is there.
Yeah.
A lot of people believe that these monuments are monuments to soldiers that were erected shortly after the Civil War, and that it was to honor this, the deaths of those soldiers. And they weren't. Most of them were built in the 1960s, and they were used and put in front of buildings of government to scare Black people from going to vote.
Yeah.
There was a stamp that you couldn't put a burning cross in the front courtyard, but you could put a Confederate soldier there. And that was the message. And so, like, even here in Indianapolis, the statue over at Garfield Park was actually in a cemetery.
Yeah.
And even the people who moved it from the cemetery to Garfield Park in the 1990s wrongfully believed that it was a grave marker. It wasn't. The thing was built in 1963.
No. The history
wasn't a grave marker.
No, there were two.
It might have been the 50s.
Yeah, so because I was going to bring this up too, because it speaks exactly to what you're saying. Like, I live right by that park, and I go to that park a lot, and I had seen it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, historical marker. What's this? Oh, okay. And this grave marker essentially there was one erected. We had a prison camp called Camp Morton here in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. It's where the state fairgrounds were. And there were pretty awful conditions, and a lot of Confederate soldiers died, including Bill Clinton's great-great-great-grandfather, I think, who was on the actual statue. And so the rules, basically, of when you have any soldier of another country die, you take care of that body. And there was a big part of the reconciliation of the country was dealing with the dead of the Confederate soldiers, making sure they went back or honoring them. And that's why there's like Fort Bragg, who's named after a Confederate general. It was a way for the federal government at the time to show we're not dishonoring you, we're not rubbing our boot in your face, we're trying to heal after the Civil War, we're trying to bring unity. And so there was a marker erected for the dead Confederate soldiers here in this Union state of Indiana. And eventually it had to be moved for one reason or another, and they were moved to a cemetery, but there wasn't room. And so the Klan in the 20s said, we'll take the marker. And in the 20s, it was erected at the city's biggest park, Garfield Park, right at the entrance. And it was funded. The move was funded by a Klansman group, and it was for the express purpose of saying, like, you don't belong in this park. And then what you're thinking of is there was a restoration movement in the 60s and the 90s, and it was shepherded by this one guy who was an IMPD police officer who went and spoke to Congress to get federal funds for it. And it turned out that he had neo-Nazi ties as well. And so when you hear the history of this stuff through the process of the debate around whether or not this should stay, you go, oh, this is a no-brainer. This is a symbol of white supremacy. It was used as a symbol of white supremacy. This belongs. There's a grave marker on these bodies now in Crown Hill. This doesn't serve a purpose except for, getting rid of. And so, like, that symbol at that park meant nothing to me ever, other than, oh, look at that historical thing. But this is a heavily black area now. And I have to wonder if it meant something to those families that went to play still in 2020. And so I'm glad it's gone. It should be gone. Had I not known the history, I would have been like, well, I'm uneasy about getting rid of history. But once you learn the history of this stuff, you go, Evan, no brainer, get rid of it. And that's what the democratic process, that's what the republic system of government that we have does. It brings everybody in. It's a teaching moment. You talk about it, and reasonable people, by and large, get the decision right. There's always going to be like the Confederate sons that still exist on the south side of Indianapolis pissed about it. But fuck them. You're not the majority anymore, and we don't want you to be the majority, and we're trying to make sure you're not the majority.
And I think having the conversation and dealing with these things in the open light is also something that teaches the generation how to deal with the next thing, the next markers, the next big controversy. It shows them the correct pathway of how to deal with these things, which is to have a conversation, have that moment of education, but also don't fear doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That's something that I think gets held back a lot, is fear of doing the right thing because people are going to be mad.
Next question.
Hello guys, really interested in your show. I'm sorry, but I don't know who either of you are, but I do now, which is the main and most important thing. So thanks very much, really enjoying it. All my love from the UK. It is 2:30 in the morning, so I'll be listening for another 10-15 minutes and then heading to bed. But yeah, really interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a podcaster here in Indianapolis. You can follow me on the Chris Spangle Show. You can also listen to the podcast, The Pat Down, which is really funny. And we're going to do a live Pat Down podcast on Friday evening. So follow my thing here, and you can get that podcast. And yeah, I guess we should. I have forgotten the rules of live radio, Evan, where you're supposed to like reset, and like Evan and I were just gonna chit chat, but then we got all these like really nice, thoughtful questions, and it just turned into a show, which I guess I can't help it now.
Yeah, I dig it. I like this. This is. Let's. There's 4 more questions. I'm down to just talking questions, and I think this is a very representative of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We spend a lot of time in the road debating policy with other people and with each other in the car rides and in the office. This is what mostly we did, in sit desks while I ate White Castle and destroyed the bathroom.
Oh, dude, he has the smelliest feet. You would not believe the smell of these feet. It's so gross. And you know what I have learned is that smelly feet is toxins being released in the body, which means you are putting so much shit in your body every day that your feet would reek up the whole place, and I'd have to work from home. I'm glad you're you're healthy now.
Yeah, I don't have that problem now. I mean, I think I still have like a bag of my old socks and a pair in a Ziploc bag I can send to you if you're feeling nostalgic.
No, I have
saving it for you.
I have Limburger cheese in the fridge.
And just from the messages, you can see that there will be no uprising and there will be no taking back of the government. People are too busy trying to be famous on stereo, TikTok, and what else. So getting involved is a very difficult concept. It takes time. Probably takes money that some people don't have. Obviously, the people that always get fucked in the end is the poor. And that's probably my biggest concern at the end of the day is it's always fuck the poor. And no one seems to care about that. Doesn't matter what party, what label you put yourself under, Democrat, Libertarian, Republican. at the end of the day, it's all about fucking the poor. And everybody seems to be okay with that. And the poor can't do anything because they're too busy being poor.
Now, you said I was depressing, but Comedy Vampire is
Yeah.
maybe more like Comedy Dementor. Now, here's what I'd say about that. I think that's a very cynical view. I think that there is an obvious choice that people make to ignore the uglier sides of humanity, of life. I personally don't do that. I host a radio show here called Now Hear This that focuses on nonprofits because I want to tell those stories. It's very low rated, you know, and I get that. And I think it's hard because people have their own stress. They have their own life. Everybody's got their own level of suckage in 2020 that's happening right now. And they don't want to onboard other people's problems. But, you know, I bet you when the numbers are run on nonprofits this year, at the end of the year, this is going to be one of the better years for a lot of nonprofits because people are kind of awakening to the idea that, man, the government can only send $1,200 in an emergency for 8 months. And so it's really going to have to be the rest of us wrapping our arms around people. Like, you know, there isn't a mask mandate that is going to solve COVID. It's going to take personal responsibility from every person doing the right thing and making the right choices. You know, it's yes, everybody wants. Hold on, let me finish a couple more sentences. Everybody wants to be famous on TikTok, but people can multitask. I have many different parts of my identity, and being a good citizen, whatever that may mean, is part of it. You know, I make the time, and you make the time that you actually about the stuff you care about. And I think the cynicism just doesn't help, Evan.
So, you know, I run a street outreach that helps people who are homeless, many that are suffering from, you know, drug addiction or alcoholism, have a lot of health problems. And when you're on the street, the longer you are on the street, the more those problems and the pain compounds just from the act of being on the street. It's hard. And for years, I've seen food banks that have been on the verge of closing because of funding or lack of supplies. You know, because every year, you know, around November, everybody pulls the cans of the crap they don't want to eat out and they put them in the bag and they're collected by the post office and they go to a place and they go, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this can of okra? Like, nobody fucking wants okra. Like, that's ridiculous. But so they try to make those things work, and they go out and they reach out to corporations who donate, you know, whole foods, and they do the best they can. One of the things that I've seen, like, I was terrified on how the increase of population of people on the street was going to skyrocket this summer. And honestly, it went up, but not as bad as I thought it was going to go up. Because there were safety nets that were put in place by communities, by people helping each other, by neighbors and friends. The other thing I thought was, you know, these companies that provide food, they're struggling. They've been shut down for a couple of weeks, and you have all these shortages and stuff. And I thought the food banks are going to be completely shut down when people need them the most. Nope.
No.
Any food bank in Indianapolis, the lines are 10 times longer than they've ever been, ever in Indianapolis. But they have plenty of food and they have plenty of volunteers and staff, and people are donating money to keep those going because they care about their neighbor. They care about the people that they've never met, but that they know are suffering. And so, you know, I've actually been a pretty cynical person, but this has revived a lot more of my faith and in humanity, to rip off other phrases.
I was too, and I would agree with you. Like, doing this show and talking to these charities has done that for me, in that I realized, like, if I would have sounded like that guy 2-3 years ago, but, you know, everybody just fucks the poor. Nobody cares about the poor. And I realized it's that I wasn't putting myself in places where I saw how much people care about the poor, or how much people care about, like what I've learned on Now Hear This, here in Indianapolis, the 12th largest city, is, you know, like Gleaner's Food Bank had 2 to 4 times the need for food this year than they normally do. They never ran out of supplies. I thought, wow, yeah. Meijer's out of food. I wonder if Meijer, Walmart, these are the biggest donors in a lot of cases to like a Gleaners food bank that then distributes to food shelters, food pantries, I should say. They upped their contributions. They upped their, in the middle of a downturn. The National Guard was called in because Gleaners at their biggest moment couldn't get their volunteers there safely. So the National Guard was called in to help with Gleaners and distribute food. And what I've heard from charity after charity after charity is heroic stories of people doing amazing things when faced with a crisis, because empathy is a very powerful motivator. Love is a very powerful motivator. And I think when we bathe ourselves in the news, we forget that. We don't see it because that doesn't sell well. But when you actually put yourself in the position to see how much other people do care for people that are struggling, your heart is touched by it time and time again. And so I would say if you feel cynical about the future of the world and the people that are getting cared for right now, like, get involved, man. Like, call up the charity that you love the most and just say, what can I do to help? What stories are going on there? What's happening?
Even if it's just an hour a week, every charity in the country will take an hour a week volunteer. If you can come in and do one thing for an hour, that relieves the stress off of somebody else in the office being able to do something.
Yeah.
And by being there that 1 hour, it will change your perspective by seeing it from the inside. You'll see the number of people who are pulling together to right the ship. And so it's amazing. I highly recommend just 1 hour, go volunteer somewhere.
All right, let's speed through these last 4 before we end.
Like I was saying, there was a dead lady that supposedly voted, and I guess that wasn't really fair for Trump. And I say that, isn't Trump going to the Supreme Court filing a lawsuit against Biden because of that? So they said that it wasn't a fair, debate.
Yeah, so I'd say that lawsuits, sue away, because in lawsuits there's a discovery process where evidence is collected, and you see what happens. I was glad that they sued, because in the process we saw how flimsy their evidence was, and so did judges, and they tossed it out. Like, as far as the dead people voting, there have been several studies that show that, like, every time there was a dead person, they'd go through, like, journalists would go through the list, and they'd find that, like, the son voted in the father's name accidentally, or it was a mistake and the person was actually alive and wasn't dead. And so like, a lot of that stuff turned out to fake news.
I think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous to dismiss that there are instances of voter fraud, and I can point to clear examples of them that I've personally experienced here in Indianapolis. Voter fraud does happen, and sometimes it happens with malicious intent. The problem is, this is where your argument falls apart, is you would need 8 instances of that, and there weren't that.
Right.
You're talking handfuls of those cases. It is real, to happen, but not to the scale that Trump would have you believe that it's happening. There were not 8 million dead people voting.
Yes, so go check out the Chris Spangle Show. We did an episode on voter fraud where we walked through, and like you said, there's 500,000 ballots that were tossed out in the primaries because there were problems with them. And so what Trump did is he took commonly occurring incidents and blew them out of the proportion as if it was fraud, when, like Evan said, there is fraud. There's always evidence. There's always fraud that takes place, but there's ways to catch people, and that was just totally dismissed. So, all right, on to the next question.
We're not talking about statues. We're talking about real people of today. We're talking about the dream and the reality of people, of mankind. Do you want to live under a dictatorship, someone dictating to you, authoritarianship, or do you want to live under democracy where we get to pick and vote? You get to vote, or you get to be led by a leader who does not allow you to have decision-making skills. No statues. Statues, I understand. People respect the statues, but this is not about them. Because if we want to get into statues, we got to get into the actual history of America, which we cannot forget about the Native Americans. They were here before us. They were here before us, and they were moved. They were pushed.
Yeah, just to reiterate my point. My point in that was that it shows you the process of talking about the statues proves your point about democracy. But I'd also say that democracy doesn't guarantee liberty. And the way that the systems are set up and even in the United States, where we were really the first government to be set up where it wasn't tribal, it wasn't one generation passing power to the next, it wasn't it was trying to make things as free as possible. But Evan, I'd say democracy doesn't inherently guarantee liberty, because you can build a democratic system that allows oppression because majorities rule, and then you end up in the situation she's concerned about, which is one group of people ruling over the other, when really you want it to be as fair as possible.
Democracy is two sheep voting to eat the sheep, or two wolves voting to eat the sheep.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
we're both individualists. I believe that the individual is the best form of self-governance. But democracy can lead to authoritarianship. It can lead to tyranny. It can lead to a dictatorship. You look at Venezuela. That's the good example. You look at Russia today. Not RT the show, but like where Russia stands at this moment. They were a Soviet country, group of countries that fell, became an open democracy. And if you go there today, it is not very representative of a democracy or a republic. It's an authoritarian regime. So it's just because the laws are written and because of a democracy and you get to vote doesn't mean that you can remove the safeguards for liberty. You have to hold those dear, and you have to continue to fight for them. And the best way to do that is by organizing, is by being out there as a group, as an affinity group, and fighting for the things and the principles that you believe in and protect them. Politicians want to remain in power, and if you can nip it in the bud when it first starts to show, if you can get up and go mobilize and march and call and get people on the ballot and vote for the people who believe like you do, not necessarily because they have a party label after their name, those things change. But that's the only way it happens. If you're expecting them to give up the power or to limit their control over you without forcing them to, it won't happen.
Next question.
America's words are not about the lives of statues of a white person, okay? Confederacy. It's not about that. America's words talk about the freedom in mankind of all Americans who decide to live here prosperously, to build, okay? When we talk about the Pledge of Allegiance, when we talk about the American flag, it's for liberty and justice for all. What are we talking about here?
And we'll wrap up with this.
Just for starters, I don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or the flag.
So first of all, we don't know where we are in this crisis right now. Right now, there's a moratorium, an eviction on moratoriums. Now, I don't know. There's a moratorium on eviction. So I don't know where it is in your state, but in the state of New York City or the state of New York, where no one's being evicted just yet until January, and that starts. Now, I don't think any nonprofit or charity is going to come in and save these people from being evicted from their home. Not very much like when there was the housing crisis, right? Same thing. They bailed out all the banks but they didn't bail out any of the people. I mean, you can go over the numbers of that crisis and see how many people lost their homes, and it didn't affect the banks, right? They were bailed out. So, again, your libertarian take is always kind of that of like a fantasy world. It just doesn't exist. The government's always going to be involved, and particularly when it comes to savings, corrupt business ass.
But here's the problem with that, is that you're not mocking libertarian beliefs, but like by not taking libertarian beliefs seriously of markets fixing problems, you look to the government to solve the problems. But you forget what the nature of government is, which is force. It's the monopolization of violence. It is the collection of government power, so the government can then force people to do what needs to be done. And so corruption is bred by that power being concentrated. And so all of a sudden, corporations, conglomerates, other countries, citizens, whomever has money and power can buy off power and direct it in whatever ways they'd like. And so what libertarians argue for is the same thing you're arguing for. It's we just have a better solution in that we want to diffuse the power and stop the centralization of force and make everything a voluntary exchange, because when you have no ability to put me in jail or to find me out of existence, you've lost power over me. So crony capitalism and the things that you're talking about are really functions of the existence of government and its monopolization on force.
Right on, man.
All right. Well, Evan, it's been great talking with you. Big fan of Evan McMahon. Make sure you go follow him on Stereo. Follow me. Evan, so glad. And we need to do this again. This is a lot of fun catching up and talking and just bullshitting with you, I guess. I've hit
absolutely, man. You know, I've missed you so much, and I like, you know, I'm gonna brag on Chris for a minute. When you started doing your podcasting in the back room of the office in 2012, you know, I knew if you took it and you really did it, you would be successful at it. But I didn't think you had the confidence in yourself to do it and to really, really do it and to push it full steam ahead. But you did. And you've built something that very few people have been able to achieve. And I'm really proud of you for doing that. And to see how you as a person have grown within your own skin and just become a more, you know, I hate to say it, confident person. It's just really inspiring, man. You're a good man. You're a good guy. And I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you, and thank you so much. All right, well, I don't know. How do we end this?
That's it.
Yeah.
How do we end this shit? I think end live.
Yeah.
Is that, you hit that button?
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Man. Well, I will see you again. All right.
Bye-bye.